before we start with Andrew Jones, Tar Heel Illustrated, Craig and Paul, David Smoak here on this Friday afternoon. Andrew, thank you very much. So we saw the reports come out earlier today with a lot of different numbers of sources. And then the University of Carolina comes out with a statement denying anything. So what's going on?
Well, I was sent a text about 8:15 this morning alerting me to Pablo's podcast and what he was reporting. Excuse me. And I immediately started checking with my sources, very quickly got up the food chain, if you will, and spoke to two sources about as good as you can get on this subject. They both said that that's not true. And they filled me in with a lot of other stuff about Jordan and some of the things that have been floating around there that aren't exactly accurate. And I went ahead and wrote a story saying that UNC says that she is not banned from the facility. She's welcome at the facility. And they clarified some things about her being included on all the emails. They said that that was primarily during the transition after Bill was hired. They made clear that she's not an employee of the university. She is his employee. She's in charge of his personal branding. And in no way is she on a payroll in any capacity by the University of North Carolina. So they were very clear that in addition to me asking about her being banned, that they told me those other things. So I think it's pretty safe to say that UNC is monitoring a lot of stuff about her and what's being said and trying to keep a little bit of a distance in understanding that problems could arise if she is an employee of the university and some of the things that are carrying on as they have. And I say that because if she's not an employee, then banning her from the facility would be very difficult. If she is an employee, then they would have to go through all kinds of red tape in order to formally have do a cease and desist and things like that, which they've had to do with athletes in the past. And some of the schools around here have. So I'm pretty satisfied with what they told me. I wrote it based on what people who know 100% or what's going on. And there's certainly the voices that you go to for something like this. I can't twist what they say. I do know what Pablo is reporting. And I would not be surprised if somewhere along the lines, a loose dial it down has been discussed. But dial it down is not banned. The word banned, I think, is what a lot of people were certainly alerted a lot of people. Everybody's putting on Twitter and social media pages banned, that she's banned, like this absolute thing has occurred. And I don't think it's occurred in that manner. But a dial it down, I would not be surprised if that's the case. It probably should be too.
I would think that verbiage aside, like you said, there is that concern. There are, I'm sure, people going like, man, this girl is a little too present in his day-to-day life for the comfort of North Carolina. So like, that's where it leads into dial it down. How do you feel though, that there is at least some tension about what's gone on about her? And I mean, the optics of a 73-year-old guy and a 24-year-old woman dating also is difficult to navigate, regardless if it's the head football coach or just any kind of famous person in town.
In conversations I've had with people that matter over there, they try to stay away from the age difference because that's a real easy rabbit hole to get lost in. Mm-hmm. And everyone's going to have an opinion on that. And most people think it's odd. I think it's odd, but that's not my life. That's not my deal. That's their deal. What the people at UNC try to focus on is how it affects the program. If it's him personally, that's separate. If it starts to affect the program, that's different. I have stayed away from it in our reporting because I didn't think it's been a football story, to be honest with you, because they're still rocking in the portal. They're getting dudes in the portal. They have a top 10 portal class. They're on the verge of maybe having a top 10 recruiting class for the class of 2026. Things are running from a football standpoint. So I don't see it really affecting a whole lot there. In fact, the closer you get to the program, the less she becomes visible in a sense. The further you get away, people just want to focus on her, the age, how weird it is, the salaciousness of it, and all that kind of stuff. So the reason I went after it today was because of ban from the football facility. The football facility became part of the story. I can tell you that a lot of people have been concerned. about the unpredictability, and the closer you get to a season, what if they lose to TCU in the opener? How is she going to lash out at media criticizing things? That's a concern people have, but it hasn't happened yet, and it's not going to happen for a few more months, and they'll have to, quote, cross that bridge when they get there. I can also tell you this, that they thought about putting out a statement after or at the same time that Bill Belichick's statement following the CBS interview came out. That was on North Carolina letterhead, if you will. And the university thought about either the chancellor, the AD, or just a general statement coming out at that time, but it was pushed back on by too many people. And I think now they realize they should have put something out then, because that opened the door for something like this to take off the way that it did. And I think they realized they may have made a mistake there. Now they had to get out there. In fact, I put in my story at the bottom, expect a release from UNC at some point today. They put one out about an hour and a half later, and they don't want to have to put out any more. And if they do have to put out more statements with respect to her, I would imagine there might be more conversations about her involvement. But right now, she's around. We've only had Bill Belichick a few times, and one of them in the press conference, she walks in, goes through a side door, is in there for 20 minutes, comes back out like she owns the place. So I've seen her more than I've seen Bill. I've seen her at basketball games. She's in the tunnel where the team comes out. She's all over. And I've seen her on the practice field talking to him during practice. You guys may have seen the clip that came out. Wide receivers are right behind him running drills, and she's talking to him. She was fixing a mic because he was mic'd up or something. She does a lot of personal branding stuff. But she's there, and she's there more than I've seen otherwise. I've been doing this for a long time with a lot of programs. I never saw Christy Fedora out there that much. I saw Sally Brown, but she would be in the stands or off to the side. I never saw Tom O'Brien or Chuck Amato's wife out there. Never saw that happen like we see with Jordan. So it's very different. And what makes it's such a unique and interesting story to a lot of people is that age difference.
So, Andrew, well, they wanted more attention. They got it, didn't they?
They got it times 1,000. I mean, what's wild is that he was such a massive story for so long. But once she started showing up at basketball games wearing things that caught people's attention, she started becoming more of the story. I know that the media, we got to a point where, hey, where's Jordan today? What's she wearing? Just because it was different, and there's a curiosity in that. We're not going to run around and take pictures and put them on social media. That's not what we would do, but other people were. You couldn't escape it, and now she's become the story. So I think part of this, it's the silly season. Things like this take off when you hit May and June. There's not a whole lot to report on. Once August fall camp hits, it should be a lot more about basketball, but he's going to have to address it. And the person I talked to today at UNC, the two people I talked to on speakerphone, I said, look, first time we get Bill, next time we get him, I said, I'm asking the first question. I'm going to ask him what's the relationship, because there's a precedent. Because Mac Brown used to say when he was hired, we were hired. We came here. You hired us. Sally's the team mom. Sally does this and does that. So he needs to explain what Jordan is doing in the football center all the time, just like any other coach would have to explain. Larry Fedora used to openly talk about his wife. I remember Chuck Amato at NC State a long time ago used to always talk about his wife. Well, I know they're not husband and wife, but she's there and she's his companion. So he needs to at least address it in some capacity in front of us.
If he says team mom, that is going to be weird.
If he says team mom, then I guess we've all got another story.
Okay, let's talk about the football part of it, though, because that was the question of can he do this in the modern college football concept? Well, yeah, if it's more NFL-like, run it more like an NFL team. And early on, it appeared that they weren't like really moving the needle on transfers because it was very deliberate. But that's very Bill Belichick. You mentioned that their portal class has really kind of taken off. How do they feel about it now? You said top 10 portal class. They're recruiting for 26 really well. The football part of it, does it appear to be improved, at least right now?
It's really hard to tell because we weren't given much access. Mac Brown was awesome as far as giving us access. We got to watch a lot of stuff. He would talk off the record about things, and you really had a good, solid idea of what was going on. Here, that wasn't the case. In fact, the players didn't have numbers in the spring. We got to see them twice. We weren't allowed to talk to any players. The last time we talked to players was in Fenway Park after the Fenway Bowl, and the guys we talked to then are gone. So we haven't talked to a player on the current roster since early November from last year, and that was Marcus Allen, a defensive back. In fact, 52 scholarship players from last year's team are gone. So they've done all kinds of reshuffling and reorganizing, and they brought in a lot of older guys from smaller programs. They brought in a lot of younger guys from big programs to come in and sort of fill things out. I like what they've done on the offensive line. I like what they've done in the secondary. I like what they've done at wide receiver and some other spots. They have a massive question at quarterback, where they have right now 2 scholarship quarterbacks on campus, and one of them is Max Johnson, who is still limping from the injury from last year and can't play. The other one is a true freshman who just went to his high school prom last week. He was an early enrollee. They have a freshman coming in, and they have Gio Lopez from South Alabama coming in. I don't know if that's enough. I thought they were going to find another quarterback by now, but they haven't. So when you look at the moves that they've made, it is very Belichick-like, very Lombardi-like, where they love diamonds in the rough. And they've gone out and gone after lots of diamonds in the rough. And I think they figure you throw all these dudes against the wall, if 8 or 9 of them stick with as many as they brought in, then that might be good enough. But it's kind of hard to tell because we cannot ask questions about the motive behind bringing in 6 offensive linemen who were starters for years at their previous schools that have 1 year of eligibility left when you have 3 returning offensive linemen starters. That's 9 starters, basically. They are able to convince guys that have 1 year left to come. I'd like to ask about that. I'd like to ask how those conversations went. I doubt we'll get any information if we do ask, but at least give us the opportunity to ask. So I do think that there's a lot there in the program. And I think people are going to trust that, look, until this guy proves he can't do it, he's probably going to get the benefit of the doubt with people believing that he will do it. But there are question marks on the roster, and there are question marks about saying you're the 33rd NFL team. In fact, one of the writers who covers Carolina was sitting next to me at the open practice they had about 3 weeks ago. And we're quiet, we're watching, and he says, AJ, if this is the 33rd NFL team, I know he's got the number 1 pick in the draft next year. So, but that's kind of where we are. We don't really know. There's a lot of unknown. I'm combing through every portal transfer back to their snaps and their blocking grades and all that kind of stuff to try to get a feel. And I do think they're going to be okay up front, but are they going to be okay defensively up front? They lost they have 3 snaps back from last season on the defensive line. 3. So everybody else either left because of eligibility or they transferred, and a couple of them were surprise transfers. So it's hard to rebuild a defensive line, especially when you're doing it mostly with guys that haven't played much. They're rolling the dice right now on some dudes that they believe that they see something in these guys that maybe others didn't see. And I think that's where the danger comes in. And that's why some people are cautious to say, hey, this is a 10-win team, just because Bill Belichick's there. College football is not NFL football. It's a difference. And we'll find out in several months just how different it might be to Bill Belichick.
Andrew, it's a great segment, man. You just signed yourself up. Anytime there's something going on with the Tar Heels, we're calling you. So either block.
And I do remember talking to you guys before the NCAA tournament game a few years ago.
Yeah, when Baylor played North Carolina at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, I think we had you on in that crazy game comeback, and then the Tar Heels won it in overtime. Yep. Yeah. Appreciate your time, man. Great segment.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Tar Heel Illustrated, Andrew